Well, it's nice to have you back this afternoon. It's been a good week.
Yeah, is it noon already? I guess
It just about,
logged
yeah.
on. Yes, I logged on just in time.
Well, I think you have a couple on the go.
Yeah. No, I was just seeing some patients this morning, so.
Oh, well, we're so glad you could come in for this. We've had some really great feedback on your session, so it's a nice way to end the week having you here again.
I'll echo that. It's been, we've had lots of compliments this week for sure.
Okay.
Great, great information sharing. So.
Great. Thank you.
Well, it is 12 o'clock, so I will do a quick little intro here and then we can get started. And as per usual at lunch, people tend to join on the first few minutes, and we are recording this session. So for anybody who can't be here today, we will be recording it, and we're hoping to have them all up on the Waypoint YouTube channel next week at some point. So we will do a Facebook post so that everybody knows when that happens, and we will circulate them pretty broadly. So thank you everyone for being here today and for being here all week. It's been a really wonderful week and a lot of great information. The session we have at noon today is particularly interesting, and I think is going to be a great way to end off. So today, Dr. Rob Meeder is going to be talking about solving problems creatively and collaboratively with children, which is a great topic. So Rob, thanks for bringing this forward. Today's session is sponsored by Wave Electric. I may have mentioned it earlier in the week with one of the other sessions that Wave sponsored, but Wave Electric has been sponsoring our event for the last number of years, and we are so thankful for their ongoing support. Go through the 10% concrete informing. They have been really wonderful supporters of our hospital and mental health for many, many years, and they are our title sponsors for the week and our sponsors for tomorrow's big fundraising event. So thank you to all of them. All of today's session, or all of this week's sessions are free, but we do have a link in the chat where you can donate to the COVID-19 Mental Health Relief Fund. All of the funds raised this week and at our big fundraiser tomorrow will be going to supporting people across the region with mental health issues, and will help our hospital adapt to the growing need for mental health addiction services. So thank you to everyone who's donated already. We are very close to reaching our goal, and we cannot thank you enough. So Rob, I will let you take it away.
Okay, yeah, thanks Holly, that's great. I think today we're reminded again that COVID is not over, and we are sort of seeing a recent surge. And as I mentioned before in our previous talks, we do expect that a surge like that puts stress on the healthcare system, which then puts stress on other parts of our society, and it trickles right down to families and family relationships and our children. And we know schools, of course, can be affected by this. They were this spring. Family relationships can be strained by this. Financial insecurity, lots of difficulties that I think will soon, not soon, but over the years, will get a better sense of the impact that this pandemic has had on our children, unfortunately. So the more we can do now to mitigate that impact and to help our kids thrive even in this difficult time, and to promote resilience, I think will be a huge benefit to them for the years and decades down the road. So hopefully these talks maybe have spurred you on to making some changes and to help you be resilient and adaptive at this time. So this is the last session. So thanks again to our sponsor, Wave Electric, and to all the sponsors throughout the week. It just shows that this community is committed to child mental health. And of course, it's a topic near and dear to my heart. That's not a question whatsoever. That's why I'm doing this. But hopefully it is important to all of you as well. So I said when I was putting this talk together that this is going to be a short talk because the message is so simple, and I'm sure sometimes we think things are harder than they actually are, and then we realize, oh, that's pretty easy. That's a pretty easy concept, and this is one of those where I kind of read about this and I know about this kind of stuff, And I'm like, you know what, there's not much, this is not too difficult. And so I hope that you'll come away from this saying today, these are some practical things I can really implement day to day with my own kids or with people that I interact with, because you'll come out of the end of this talk with a recognition, I think, that solving problems collaboratively and sometimes a bit more systematically is a skill that we want to use with our kids, but that our kids will hopefully go on and apply in their school situations, in their work relationships, in their personal relationships, that even we can use in our relationships with our partners and our adult relationships that we have with other people. I mean, this is broadly applicable, and I am specifically talking a bit today about kids and how we apply this to kids. So let me just share my screen, make sure I get the right talk up again. And I'm becoming a pro at this now. So I've done this is like fifth talk in a row. So this is solving problems collaboratively and proactively. And I will say that this material is not original to me. I am borrowing heavily from a work that's been done by a number of Harvard professionals, Dr. Ross Green, who wrote The Explosive Child. There is a similar collaborative problem-solving approach that comes from Massachusetts General Hospital. This is also not unique to kids. Like I said, there is a famous book about negotiating called Getting to Yes, which is by the Harvard Negotiations Project. It was a best-selling book. And the principles in there, if you look at it, you go like, hey, that's collaborative problem solving. So this is a well-studied, well-researched, and validated approach to behavior and behavior challenges in kids. So I'll just mention that, and I'll point you to some resources around that as well. So let's start off with some cases, and some of this you might resonate with some of these kids, because maybe you're like this yourself at one point, or maybe you got kids like this, or you have grandkids like this, or nieces and nephews, or students who fit in this category. So Ava, age 10, she loves her new phone. Parents decided that she was old enough to have a smartphone. And but there's rules, which is good. I think nobody gives their kids keys to the car and says, go ahead and drive it away. You ease into it. There's a graduated licensing system for cars, and there should be a graduated approach to technology for kids too. The internet is a wide sea of and a deep sea of many different good and bad things. And that's not a value judgment. There is just some negative stuff on the internet, and there's positive stuff on the internet. And just giving your child complete random access at that age would be not super responsible. So we need to set some limits on that. So the rules for their phones are that only on the main floor of the house. They don't want kids kind of scroll away in their bedroom, all day long under the covers with an iPhone. No phone in the morning before school, because before school is busy enough as it is, making lunch and getting ready for the bus and getting your snowsuits on, etc. So no phone before school, and no phones after 8 p.m., which is very sound, because no phones after 8 p.m. So these are their screen time rules, seem relatively reasonable. And they've also set out some limits on, appropriate ratings for apps and for internet websites, which you can do in most phones, and every parent is familiar with screen time settings on the child's phone. So all that to say are just some rules here Ava has been asked to follow, and some guidelines. And I don't know how the rules are set. I'm not sure if that involved a discussion with Ava, or whether that was just like, here are rules, these are our rules, you better obey them, not consequences. So that's usually kind of our approach to parenting, is that we've been through this, we have wisdom, we have your best interest in mind. You don't really understand all the dangers and the concerns yet, So we're just going to be, kind of giving you, these are the rules. But for 2 nights now, Ava snuck her phone into her bed at night, and she's doing exactly what mom and dad thought that she shouldn't be doing. And so when mom and dad take the phone away, she screams and yells, and there's a big fight. And Ava's got her reasons for why she's doing what she's doing. All right, I'll leave it at that and talk about Joshua. He's age 13, so just entered the teen years. He's doing well in school, and he has some great friends. However, parents are finding that he is quote unquote lazy and disrespectful towards them. He increasingly ignores them, especially when they want him to help with the chores and cleaning up after dinner and putting his dirty laundry in the hamper. And so, I'm just gonna try and I'm trying to clear up my screen so I can actually read what I'm talking about, but I'm having some difficulty. Anyways, but recently he started rolling his eyes, and last night he called his dad a loser, and he walked away from the table and went up to play on his Xbox while mom and dad cleaned up after dinner. So this is not what they had envisioned after dinner to look like. They want Josh to help out a bit at home, and dad's had enough. He says, time to put the foot down. This kid needs a boot camp or some kind of, consequences. And we're gonna, quote unquote, put the foot down. I don't know if you ever saw that movie, I think it was called Inside Out, where this kid has a family, and it's all about kind of psychological. It's Disney. I think it's Pixar, and it's all animated. So it's great movie. But this talks about the dad put the foot down. It's kind of a funny scene if you haven't seen it. Definitely look at the put the foot down scene, because every dad or every parent, I'm sure, was sitting there watching that, going like, "Ooh, yeah, that looks familiar." All right. So like I said, I did borrow heavily from Dr. Ross Green's work, and I think, having done 5 sessions now this week, I think I am entitled to maybe one shameless plug for my podcast, the Smart Family Podcast. If you have a chance to listen to episode 1, it's actually with Dr. Ross Green, and we talk about collaborative problem solving with him. And so if you haven't had a chance to listen to it there, that's my one plug for the Smart Family Podcast. Lots of other episodes there too, which you might be interested in. Just browse around on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. Okay, so let's talk about the roots of challenging behavior. In fact, let's talk about the roots of all behavior. So behavior is how you respond to a certain stimulus in your environment, all right? Every animal has behavior. That's, you get something happens to you and you respond in a certain way, and that would be your behavioral response. In broad terms, that's what behavior is. And we have behavior every day. Like, I'm behaving right now. I'm moving my arms, I'm making eye contact with you, I'm moving in a certain way. There's a way I'm interacting with the screen here. That is my behavior right now. We don't even think about it at all. It's a subconscious. I'm interacting with lots of aspects of my environment right now in certain very predictable, almost automatic, reflexive ways. That's not the behavior I'm talking about. I'm talking about the behavior that catches our attention and that we notice. And, we generally don't notice good behavior. In fact, we should be pointing out behavior that we appreciate in our kids, that we like to see more of. Catch them being good is a good thing. We sometimes fill our lives more with no, 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 and not so much with, hey, that's awesome, or hey, I just noticed that, and that was awesome how you did that, or I like how you blah, blah, blah. So catch your kids being good. Point out the good behavior, not just always the bad behavior. They've done studies, and there's a lot more like finger pointing and no, you can't, no, you can't, no, you can't in a child's day than there is positive, sort of encouraging and positive interaction with the child. So behavior, challenging behavior, always results when there is a gap, and Dr. Ross Green calls it incompatibility. I like the word gap because it's clear. It's like there's a gap between the child's abilities and our demands and expectations. And whenever there's a gap there, it's going to be filled by some kind of behavior. All right. And that behavior can either be adaptive, but which demands, something's going to happen. either the kid can respond by asking for help, taking a break, those even maybe just walking away from the situation. That would be considered adaptive behavior. And we talked in our previous talk about how that comes from the frontal part of the brain. Our cortex helps us to inhibit maybe our impulsive behavior, as opposed to maladaptive behavior, which is yelling or screaming or defiance or kicking, hitting, biting, punching, all that stuff. Like that would be considered maladaptive behavior. That's what we want to see less of, right? We want to see kids, we always say, use your words, because that's a much healthier and productive way of solving a problem than, physical aggression or lashing out or raising the temperature by yelling. Okay, so kids will always fill that gap with behavior that can be adaptive or maladaptive, and challenging behavior results when expectations placed on a child exceed their ability to respond adaptively. So this flip the lenses a little bit around how behavior comes about, okay? Because it's not usually about a kid just wanting to push buttons or just trying to get your attention. Yes, they are actually getting your attention, but not like, they're just attention seeking, as if, more of a negative connotation to that, or being vindictive, getting revenge or getting back at you for some reason, or choosing just to be a jerk, a lot of parents come to me saying like, yeah, it's just hard to like, because a lot of his behavior is intentional, attention seeking. He just knows how to push the buttons in the right way, and everything just explodes all the time. And oftentimes, and I'm not saying this is like, this doesn't happen every once in a while. Yes, there are, some kids who may just get so frustrated that they do kind of push their buttons, but that is the minority of the time. And when that does happen, there's usually other underlying reasons for it, which we'll explore in a second. So when children misbehave, they are expressing in a maladaptive way, such as hitting, kicking, swearing, eye rolling, like in Josh's case, that they're having trouble meeting expectations. In other words, the child is lacking the skills to meet the expectations. And that means that there's a problem to solve, right? Whenever a child is lacking the skills to meet expectations that we've set out. So again, in Ava and Josh's case, there were some rules that Ava was expecting. That was our expectations. And in Josh's case, there were some expectations around helping out with chores after dinner. And so there we go. There's a problem to solve if we see that behavior as for us to solve. So addressing the problematic and challenging behavior in our children requires us to assess which skills they are lacking or lagging behind, which is causing the problem that the child is facing. And kids display challenging behavior because they are lacking the skills not to be challenging. And if they had the skills, they would not be challenging because, and this is just one key principle, that kids will do well if they can. All right, just think about that for a minute. So kids will do well. Kids will choose to do the less challenging behavior or the more acceptable behavior if they can. Now you might doubt that a little bit. You might say, like, no. They're doing this on purpose. They are trying to like push my buttons. They're trying to cause a scene or rile me up or get somebody upset. Like I said, that might happen like 1 or 2% of the time. If given a choice, if a child is an option and has the knowledge and ability and skill to respond in a positive, adaptive way, most of the time, like the vast majority of the time, they will do and choose that. And so if they can, kids will do that option. So kids will do well if they can. So we have some common misperceptions around behavior, that it comes out of blue. So I get a lot of parents saying like, it's like walking on eggshells. We don't know like what's going to I understand that, like also thing, and it's like and it goes off. And then unfortunately, that just leads to escalation, and then we get upset and we raise our voice, and then they raise their voice. It just gets out of control very quickly. We go from 0 to 90 in about 5 seconds, or the green zone to the yellow zone to the red zone. When they talk about zones of regulation in about 2 minutes, things are out of control. And it's like, what triggered that? Like, I just looked at you the wrong way, or I just said one thing, or I made one kind of minor request, and it's like met with defiance and escalated temper tantrum or meltdown. And it's like walking on eggshells. We have to constantly either say nothing or avoid and dance around anything that could be possibly upsetting. That's not a way to live. That's not a way to have family time. That doesn't work. And so we need to figure out like what the trigger is. And I would challenge you to drill down and dig. And if you're having this kind of behavior with a kid, just really try and drill down and say like, well, what? Because most of the time the trigger is predictable and is much more common. There's probably fewer actual triggers than we realize when we actually drill down and get to the point of like, what's the actual difficulty here? What is the flashpoint? And most of the time that's much more predictable, and it may not account for all the behavior that we're seeing, but the majority of behavior that we're seeing is probably due to maybe 2 or 3 specific difficulties that the child may be facing. And then a common misperception again about, they're choosing to misbehave. Again, kids will do well if they can. And I truly, honestly believe that is true, the vast majority of the time. And if we can improve behavior the vast majority of the time, then we're much better situation to deal with the exception cases where kids maybe, are pushing buttons or are doing it because, for some of those other reasons that we mentioned. But, if we can get rid of like kind of 80% of the challenging behavior, that's going to make a huge improvement on how your family functions and the relationship that you have with your children. And the other thing is, like I said before, challenging behavior is generally much more predictable than we think. The other thing to think about then is, well, if the child's lacking the skills, like how well would punishing challenging behavior work? I mean, it's kind of like you're putting consequences, whether it's timeout or some other punishment for bad behavior, when you're like, the child doesn't even have the skills to do what the expectations are. So we have to be really careful that, eventually time won't work anymore. I see it across from a lot of families who say like, yeah, we give him time. He doesn't care. Doesn't even care. It doesn't faze him whatsoever. We have no leverage with any of our taking away things and, putting in consequences or whatever it might be. It's all lost because, well, then you got to think to yourself, okay, maybe there's a reason why the child's given up because it's not working. And we should be thinking too, it's like, well, how's that working for us? It's not working. We need to think about this in a different way. And I'm not saying there's no time for things like, 1, 2, 3 magic, where you give a child a chance to turn it around when you count from 1 to 2. And if they don't, there's a consequence. That probably works sometimes, and there's value to that. I've actually talked to the author of that book as well on the podcast, and that works too, as a very valuable approach. But the key there is, you're giving the child a chance to turn things around themselves when you count to 2 before you put a consequence in place. So, but general, punitive measures, and especially in schools, like things like we all know as parents, like as a child gets suspended, that doesn't actually teach us to get the skills that they need to avoid the suspension the next time. That punishes the parents more than it does the child, because they like being home, and then they get anyways, don't get me started on that. So I want to talk to you about in 3 ways to solve problems. And in the explosive child and in the collaborative and proactive solutions that Dr. Green talks about, he talked, there's 3 ways. There's plan A. Plan A is to put the foot down, which is you think of a solution, you put it on your child. Plan B, which we're going to spend some more time, we're going to drill down on that, is solve the problem together, proactively and collaboratively. Proactively if possible. That's the best scenario. That's the time to do it. Our brains are much more open when we're not in a heightened emotional state. And collaboratively, all right, together. And plan C is not, which is not a bad plan sometimes. A dangerous situation, or there really isn't a good time to use plan B, then you can put it off till later. All right, you can say, okay, right now we're just calling it off, or we're moving, or we're going somewhere else, or we're putting some measures in place because when we get home, or when we have time, or when we're all cooled down a bit, we're gonna go to plan B. Okay, so plan B should always be the result of implementing plan C. All right. So the problem with plan A is that unilaterally imposed solutions almost never stick. They're good for the short term, and they're good at sort of maybe when you put the foot down or use more punitive measures to kind of like implement plan A. They might promote some fear and some healthy fear and respect to say like, okay, I better not do that again. But if that's how you want to promote behavior, that's not what really I would want for my kids. I would want my kids to improve their behavior, to change their challenging behavior, because they actually see the value in it and the need for it, not just because it's just brought down from on high. And so I think that's what I see, when we impose solutions, when we just say this is the way it is, this is the rules, while you're living here, blah blah blah. That might have short-term, benefit. It doesn't actually improve the relationship. It actually deteriorates the relationship, because it is on the premise of there is no relationship. It goes one direction, and relationships always go in 2 directions. Okay, positive relationships go in 2 directions. So that's why plan A generally is not a great long-term solution. It only provides short-term benefits and probably has more long-term negative consequences. So what are the steps for plan B? Let's just double click on that and say, all right, plan B. The first step is listening with empathy. And that with empathy, and description of the problem, and maybe even down the road solutions. Like plan B, the listening with empathy to their concerns when there's challenging behavior might be a whole new world for a child. So you may get a little bit of kind of confused looks when you proceed down that road. But I want you to start using it. I want you to start trying it with your kids and say, hey, okay, you're mad. What are you having difficulty with? What's up? Best way to start a question. What's up? Open-ended, non-threatening. It invites a response. It makes them realize that their perspective actually matters, and that's important. This is not like a token, like okay, let's let you air your dirty laundry a little bit here, and you're facade, but don't worry, I'm gonna come down with my solution in a few minutes here, but I'll give you at least a chance to vent a little bit. That's not what this is. You want to listen with empathy. You want to really find out, because you would be surprised sometimes to see what their perspective is and what they might come back with. I think many parents, when they start implementing plan B, are surprised at some of the things that comes from their own children, and how probably insightful and beneficial it is to know their perspective. And then from there, you move to defining the problem. So this is where you, as an adult, get to express your perspective and your concerns. All right. So I know you want to get back upstairs and finish your game. But let me tell you about kind of what I see. And, you know, your dad and I want you to help with putting away the dishes. We want you to be part of family. You know, it just helps us to get on with some of the stuff in our evening as well. We can all get back to what we want to do sooner if we just all pitch in. And, you know, and we want to help pitch in with your chores and things that you want us to help you with, but, you know, it's good for our family if you help as well. So just describing, like, you know, hey, we think piano lessons are important because, you know, it develops a really, you know, nice part of your brain that helps you learn in other areas. You know, down the road, you might find playing music is relaxing. I know you don't like your piano lessons now, but, you know, and or whatever the challenge may be, is like, we don't want you to have a phone in your bed at 8 o'clock at night, because there's lots of good studies that show that the bright lights can actually prevent you from falling asleep. And you know what it's like when you can't fall asleep. You lie awake for a long time, and you're distracted by the buzzing of your phone because your friends are texting you, and then you wake up the next morning all grumpy and irritable, and, you know, your school day doesn't go as well. So that's the adult perspective. And what you want to come up with out of that, and sometimes it takes a bit of drilling down, a bit of back and forth. It's two-way. Is to come up with like a list of, like, you know, this is the difficulty. What's the actual difficulty here? What's the actual trigger? And then you want to invite solutions. So brainstorm solutions and ideas together to come up with a mutually satisfactory. That's very important. Okay. It has to be satisfactory to both parties. I know that sounds like, whoa, wait a second, who's the parent here? You're still the parent, but you're inviting them to own and be accountable to the solution that you're coming up with together. All right. And when a child comes up with a solution, they let them list their potential solutions, brainstorm solutions, like, you know, okay, I want to stop doing piano lessons altogether. Okay, well, that's a solution, but that doesn't actually meet my concerns, you know, as an adult. So let's talk about some other ones. Like, okay, maybe, you know, let's give you a break from piano lessons, you know, once a month. Let's take a week off so that, you know, you can take some more time to practice and feel like you can get caught up. So again, just a back and forth about a solution that is mutually satisfactory. So we have to be able to compromise maybe and give in a little bit. It's good for kids to see that their parents are not like just walls of stone. All right, because, I mean, don't you want your kids' relationships with each other and with their friends and with people around them to be like that there can be some give and take? Wouldn't that be great if we had a little bit more of that in our leaders, in our political world? Sure, if we want it from them, why can't we model that with our kids now? And our kids are our future leaders, right? And you want it to be realistic. All right, so you know, if your child proposes a solution that, you know, they should be on Minecraft 24 hours a day, that might be satisfactory to them. That's not really realistic, right? Or whatever. And just like you might say, well, you know, the solution is that mom or dad has to always be looking over your shoulder in the room with you when you're playing Minecraft. Well, that might not be realistic either. So anyway, so come up with a mutually satisfactory and realistic solution, and then promise to try it and come back at a certain time, a week or 2 weeks or a day or 2 days, whatever the solution might be, and reassess and be open to modifying it at a later date. I think that just reduces the tension. It's not forever. And if it works, you know, great. And again, catch them being good. Praise them for some of the things that you're seeing when they're putting these solutions into play. And make sure that you hold your part as well. Best done, like I said, when it's done proactively, not in the heat of the moment. All right. So when there's a big escalation going, okay, now let's use plan B. Let's brainstorm some ideas. No, that's not going to work. The temperature has to come down. We need the sharp music to to stop. And I like Dan Siegel's work in this, the whole brain child, where he says, connect, then redirect. All right. So before you can have a conversation and talk about, changing directions or putting something into place, emotionally connect. And that means you're down with your emotional volatility. And, we all get upset. That's part of life. That's part of who we are. But that needs to come down. We need to get down at eye level with our kids sometimes, touch them in a loving way. That physical contact is just so important when it's done lovingly, and put an arm around them or give them a hug or whatever, look them in the eyes and get down to their level. And when you can do that and the child looks at you, then you've got them engaged, and it's like, okay, let's just talk about what happened there. And that could be an hour later, 2 hours later, it could be the next day. Sometimes the temperature needs to come down. So let's just kind of summarize there. Let's go back to Ava, age 10. What do we do here? And so she's screaming and she's yelling like, you don't, it's my phone. And, my friends they want me to get back to them like right away. And you can't take my phone away from me, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so temperature needs to come down. You may just have to just say, okay, let's move the phone from the situation. And we need to stay calm. If we can stay calm, we promote that for our kids. Eventually they'll see us modeling that type of behavior. And then let's talk. But once we talk, what are Ava's concerns? Why are the reasons that she's kind of sneaking her phone to bed? Maybe she feels that there's messages that she misses. Maybe she's not finished the game that she was playing. Maybe she feels a real pressure to keep up with certain chats. There's lots of kids that have these streaks going, and if they don't respond, and so those are Ava's concerns, and she feels that's why she finds that rule too restrictive. And then you say your concerns. We've mentioned some of them already. And then you brainstorm together, and like you listen to her, and she listens to you, and then you work. It goes back and forth, and then you collaboratively come up with a mutually satisfactory and realistic solution, and be prepared to make some changes to some of those rules. Some of them might be sort of less negotiable. Others, you can move a bit on that, and I mean, if you just visualize it as like you and Ava are both here looking at the same difficulty that you've identified. So once you kind of reframe it from that perspective, as opposed to we're sitting on opposite ends of the table and we're just going to meet halfway, that's not a way to solve the problems. Like, it's not like can be haggling back and forth, like you do in a marketplace sometimes, and you can get to the part where you're, each unsatisfied and feel like you got ripped off. No, like you want to get to a place where you're both sitting on the same side, saying, here's the issue that we see. Using your phone in the evening, what can we do about this? And maybe there is a chance to say like, well, you know what? Let's say every evening, half hour before you go to bed, you can just, maybe check your messages for 5 minutes. We'll put the oven timer on for 5 minutes, and then you can sort of tell your friends, hey, I'm off to bed now, or I have homework to do, and we'll see you guys in the morning, and maybe sign off that way. And then your friends don't expect you to answer right away. Like just there's a possible solution. It could be any range of solutions. So that's how you might approach that. And then Josh, hey, what's the difficulty here? Well, and it could be, again, any number of difficulties, but there's probably some underlying reason why Josh is displaying this kind of behavior. It could sound like he's got good friends, etc. And then just putting the foot down like dad wants to do, that's not fighting for a relationship, right? Teenagers, you want to maintain that relationship. You want to maintain that communication. And if it's just going to be like one way, put the hammer down, that doesn't promote the relationship. You want to listen to Josh and say like, hey, what's going, what's up? I noticed you're kind of rolling your eyes, and keep the temperature down, kind of rolling your eyes. You seem upset, like did something happen to you? I've had many kids who are disrespectful to their parents because they're being bullied at school, they are, failing at something, there's something happening online that's just nagging at them and that's just making them irritable. And just opening up that channel of communication, and if they know that you're receptive to their input, it may take a while, especially if this is a new way of doing things, but you want to maintain that rapport. And if you can have that right from an early age and do this type of problem solving right from when they're 2 and 3 and 4 years old, because you can do it when they're this young, it can be part of the DNA of your family. Then by the time they reach the teenagers, just the communication is much more natural, as opposed to when you're trying to do a 180 when your kid's 14 or 15. Unfortunately, I sit across a lot of parents who are like, they've had a difficult relationship. There've been minimal communication for years and years. Now they're 15 or 16, and they want some massive behavioral turnaround to happen. It's like, oh, that ship sailed. Like, you can have influence still, but you can't make them do anything at that point. Like, you can't really force anything. Like, they have to want to do it. And ultimately, I mean, that's what you want. We want our kids to own the solutions and to be accountable and to want to do the right thing. You don't want to force that on them. You don't want to legislate behavior. You want them to choose the right thing, because those are just things that have been part of the discussion from a very early age. So just to summarize, so solving problems collaboratively and proactively, the CPS model, big fan of it, works a lot of the time, maybe not 100% of the time, but certainly if you use this approach in general, for big problems and for little problems, just make it part of, like, just put this in your quiver of tools to use with your kids. Identify the unsolved problem. What's the real problem here? So you should be coming up with a specific list of difficulty with coming in from recess, if you're a teacher and this is happening. Difficulty with doing piano after you come home from school, practicing your piano. Difficulty with putting the iPhone away at 8 o'clock. All right. So the more specific you get, the more likely you are to have like a realistic solution. All right. If you keep it vague, like, difficulty with controlling your emotions, well, that's too big of a problem. You want to be very specific. And if you can do that with 2 or 3 specific issues, you'd be surprised how big of an impact that can make on entire day's function. What are the lagging skills? And then use plan B proactively. Listen with empathy. What are the child's concerns? Define a problem. What are your adult concerns? And then invite the child to come up with solutions. You have your invitation as well to bring some solutions to the table and find some that work out, that are a mutually satisfactory and realistic solution. And this can be a quick, like 1-minute thing. It can be a 1 hour or 1 day type thing, depending how big the problem is and how pervasive it is. But if it just, eventually this kind of comes naturally. You're listening to the kid and they listen to you and you kind of like, great. And that's eventually what you want. And then afterwards, agree to reassess and revise, because ultimately, I mean, isn't this a skill that we want your kids to grow up with so that it becomes just natural to them, that this is how we solve problems? Too much in our society, we have to impose solutions and enforce solutions, and we still use a very like unilateral approach. That's that does get effects, but that's not ultimately what makes us happy and what improves relationships. It just sets us up to be adversarial. So the more that we can work collaboratively and come up with solutions together, the better, whether it's with friends, with our spouses or partners, whether it's in business or our work environments. These are the types of relationships that I think we should all strive for down the road. And it could start with your kids today. The earlier the better, but it's never too late. Again, if you want to go to livesintobalance.org, that's the CPS model website. Huge number of resources there. parents, for educators, everything we talked about. The book, I mean, I have them in my office here. This is The Explosive Child. There's a picture of it there as well. There's other books, you know, Lost at School, Raising Human Beings. Those are Dr. Green's books that I recommend them to children all the time. I mentioned Dan Siegel's books. I don't see them on my bookshelf here right now. I think they're at home. But, you know, The Whole Brain Child, Drama Discipline, Same Principles. Those are just fantastic books to read about your child behavior and challenging behavior and how to address that. So look those up and listen to the podcast if you want, and then I'll just leave it there if there's any questions. And I will just, let's see here, try and do a stop share here. Okay. So there are a few questions there. How do you work towards this approach to solving problems when you have a very challenging and often defiant kid? Well, you just got to start. And like I said, this might be raise a few eyebrows or not get buy-in. The kid might not even trust you, that you're like, are you trying to like trick me here? Are you just trying to pull the wool over my eyes here? Because, you know, whenever I say what I'm concerned about, you know, I'm not getting anywhere. So this may take a bit of concerted effort, and before the kid actually believes that you actually mean it, and you're in for the long haul here. So just start, and starting with that question, what's up? You know, that's a great way to invite a response from the child. Again, the book goes into much more sort of scenarios and details about how that can look in different with different temperaments and different children from different situations. Are there approaches to solving problems that you feel kids could teach adults? Well, you know, solving problems involves both the kids and the adults. So again, there are probably many things, there are many solutions to problems that kids come up with that surprise adults, and you're like, I never thought about that, or I had no idea that was what was bothering you, or I had no idea that that's what you were thinking, or that you were just assuming X, because, you know, and so we don't know if we don't ask, right? We don't know if we don't ask. And so if we invite a response and we listen with empathy, right? That means we take our time, we keep the emotional volatility low, then we're going to get some real eye-opening responses, I believe. I have with my own kids, and I have with patients as well. How do you find a balance between solving problems with kids and giving them too much power in the child and parent dynamic? It's not about power, it's about working together. And I know this is a little bit, you know, spare the rod, spoil the child, blah, blah, blah. Like, okay, sure, that might work. But is that the relationship that you really want? Don't you want your kid to choose to do the right thing and to be accountable and to come up with solutions, to brainstorm with you, to work with you on challenging behavior, as opposed to, you know, other ways that are more force and you know, one way, unilaterally imposed solutions? No, you know, that's I mean, our society has grown up with this concept of, you know, somebody being in charge and enforcing the rules. That might work, but if that's the relationship that you want, that'll work. But I honestly don't think that is ultimately the relationship we want. We don't want our kids to be in that kind of a power dynamic and struggle when they're with their spouses. or even with our coworkers. It's not healthy. It's not healthy. That's not what we want. I don't think so anyways. So work towards, it's not like about like I'm just giving in or I'm a pushover. No, like you're connecting with your kids, you're building a relationship. And like I said, relationships, good relationships, positive relationships go two directions. And it's not just always one way down either way. Like it's not like your child is kind of beating you into submission every time. You're just constantly giving in. No. Remember, just your input is just as valuable. And and you might come and say, well, it's more valuable because I have more experience, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, like I said, you'd be surprised if you give kids a bit of airtime and what they can come up with and how useful it is to implement some of their strategies and into the entire solution that's going to work for you. It's much more likely to be effective, and then you're both happy. So anyways, that's I'll leave it at that. And if there's any other questions, yeah, let me know.
Rob, thank you so much. I think we're going to miss our daily chats with you. This has been a really great weekend. Again, today was an excellent session. I think it was such a nice way to end off all of these conversations and some really practical advice that I think many parents will benefit from. And we had a number of people on here today. Because this is being recorded, we're hoping that this will reach many more parents. So Dr. Meeder, thank you so much. And we hope we can do something like this again soon. A big thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Holly. That's great.
And a big thank you as well to Wave Electric, who sponsored this session and some of our earlier sessions this week, to Midland Honda and Percent Concrete and Forming, who have been sponsors all week long. We hope we'll see you guys tomorrow in, as we've been saying, an entirely different location, because we will all be practicing good physical distancing as we get active with our families. So please, tomorrow, choose whatever adventure you want to do, kayak, canoe. It's going to be beautiful. Go for a walk, a bike, a run, and all proceeds will support the COVID-19 Mental Health Relief Fund. As I said, we are very close to our goal, and a lot of that has to do with the spectacular speakers we've had this week, our wonderful sponsors, and all of you for participating. So thank you so much.